Hey everyone, I'm Bertil Auris. 2022 is pretty much over now as of the making of this video. This has definitely been one of the biggest years of my life for me. Transitioning from a rather stressful and mentally disappointing first half to a rather spectacular second half, this is a time that will be part of me forever. At the start of this year, I never would have thought that 12 months later I would have over 2,600 people watching my content, and it makes me happy that I've been able to bring joy to so many people doing what I love. It's been a special year for me, and I think the best way to celebrate and conclude it would be by talking about one of my favorite Mario games of all time. Way back in September, I ranked all of the 8 cups in Mario Kart 7, but in that video I also jokingly mentioned that maybe I should have done a review on the game instead, since it would have been a better way to show my appreciation for this installment. Well, I think you guys have waited long enough for it. As a thanks for all the support this year, let's talk about why Mario Kart 7 is my favorite one and an underrated gem.
No, this game is rightfully overlooked in the Mario Kart franchise. You're telling me Mario Kart DS is awful, but 7 is an underrated gem?
I did not say that.
Yeah? Did you guys know Albert Boris actually hates Mario Kart DS?
No, I have never said that I hated that game. This is getting out of hand. We are not gonna talk about Mario Kart DS now, because personally, I think Mario Kart 7 deserves more attention as one of the most overlooked entries in the series. So in this video review, I wanted to look at everything this game does right to shine some light on it.
And I will point out to you all the problems, since you clearly won't.
Well, I guess sugarcoating isn't the best idea ever, so fine. Just don't jump scare me again over regional course names like you did in the last video. Admittedly, my opinion of Mario Kart 7 is slightly biased. Mario Kart 7 was, alongside Mario Kart Wii, the childhood Mario Kart game for me. And even though I got Mario Kart Wii first and arguably spent even more time playing it, Mario Kart 7 has always spoken to me more, even from day one. And one of the biggest reasons as to why was the first impression, which also then let me open my eyes to all the other good things that this game had. And exactly what made the first impression of Mario Kart 7 so good, compared to Wii or any other Mario Kart for that matter? Well, it does for one boil down to the game's soundtrack. Okay, so soundtrack is subjective, and nostalgia can admittedly have an impact on what soundtrack you like. Which I'm aware of when I'm making this point, especially since this was a childhood game for me. But as I said, I also played a ton of Mario Kart Wii in my childhood, and despite the bigger nostalgia for it, I wouldn't make this point about that game, so I hope what I'm saying now isn't just pure nonsense. So let's make a run for it, and I personally believe that Mario Kart 7's soundtrack is perfect when it comes to making a good and welcoming first impression. Even as early as in the title screen and main menus. Every Mario Kart game has a musical theme that plays in the title screen and main menus. The title theme is supposed to be hectic and get you pumped up, while the main menu theme is more laid back so you can concentrate on preparations before the big races. This is the essential. But it's even better if you step a little above that bar. Frankly, most title and menu themes in Mario Kart are kinda just there. They do the job, but at the end of the day, they don't have that much personality. Oh yay, I'm kinda hype. Oh yay, now I can concentrate. But that's just my opinion. In fact, for me, the only exceptions to the title theme are Mario Kart 64, DS, and you guessed it, 7. From the moment I started playing this game, I was immediately drawn in by the charming title tune. Surprisingly enough, it's a bit more laid back compared to other title themes in the series, taking on a more satisfying and almost melancholy approach. This always made a massive difference for me. The title theme is the first thing you hear when booting up the game, so it needs to feel welcoming and upbeat, which this song does well. But it's usually also the first thing you hear after you've maybe completed a cup, and when you've done something like that, you usually feel pretty satisfied. And that satisfying feeling is only amplified by this tune that screams good job. And it gets even better with the main menu theme. Apparently the menu theme was originally just gonna be the same tune as used in Mario Kart Wii. My goodness, am I glad I did not go that route. It's not a bad song, but 7's version just has so much more personality, honestly. Again, most menu themes just reach the bare minimum of being a calm before a storm. But in 7, just like with the title theme, this one also goes the extra step in adding more emotions. It also feels a bit more melancholy. And happy as well, ironically. Again, this might just be me, but this extra glimpse of personality in these tunes always made me feel more than just a typical Mario Kart feeling. And honestly, I could say this about a large majority of Mario Kart 7's soundtrack. On the whole, a lot of the songs just feel more down to earth compared to other Mario Kart games, whether it's the grand Woohoo Island theme, the welcoming circuit tune, the mysterious song for Shy Guy Bazaar, or the adventurous Cheep Cheep Cape. A lot of the songs still follow the traditional Mario Kart formula, but the fact that there's a lot more tunes that usually break tradition this way has always given Mario Kart 7 a certain charm that hasn't been replicated in any other game. Again, at least for me, it already gives the game a very good head start, and thankfully, the very content this atmosphere is spread over is pretty kingly. The first impression isn't just about the music or the atmosphere being good. When it comes to Mario Kart, it's also about the track selection, and the first cup in particular. And Mario Kart 7's Beginner Cup delivers, even in its opening track Toad Circuit. Never mind the fact that the song has an incredibly mellow and welcoming vibe to it, as opposed to a lot of the more intense and stereotypical circuit themes. But despite looking bland, the track design is surprisingly intricate with multiple shortcuts, visual assets, a design that's actually not just a typical figure 8, and a great introduction to one of the game's core mechanics. Yeah, we'll get to this thing in a bit. This isn't much, and I wouldn't call it a great course, but for being an opening track, it leaves a solid first impression, and it only gets better from there. In fact, Mario Kart 7 probably has one of the most consistent quality track selections in the entire series, both in the Nitro and Retro departments. Of course, it's largely subjective what tracks you enjoy or not, but it's harder to argue that Mario Kart 7 wasn't one of the most revolutionary Mario Kart games when it came to gameplay, because it added not one, not two, but 3 new gameplay gimmicks. And all 3 of them are amazing, whose impact is still felt today. Firstly, there's the trademark gliding mechanic, which allows you to glide in the air whenever you trick off of these blue ramps. It was such a cool feature that gave a completely new perspective to Mario Kart. No longer did big jumps need to restrict your movement from a canal or magnet panel. And thanks to it, you could also do even bigger jumps now without it being boring, since you can freely move around while gliding. Not to mention it's just fun to glide in general, even when it's not a big jump. A lot of the most interesting Mario Kart tracks in the series today incorporate the glider in some way or another, even in newer retro tracks, because it just makes the experience feel all the more satisfying. Well, except for Wii Maple Treeway. The infamous bridge was always better. However, it might feel repetitive to have such an epic feature appear thrice in a race, as that might downplay the grand feeling of it. Well, that's why Mario Kart 7 added another equally vast and important feature, the section division. Because starting from this game, some tracks are divided up into sections rather than laps, which allow the developers to create massive tracks without feeling too long. It's honestly quite unreal just how much of an impact this had, because now you could have tracks that felt like an adventure with an actual start to finish. The Woohoo Duo tracks were a really good first impression for this, and 3DS Rainbow Road absolutely nails this. Another slightly less but still equally important gameplay feature introduced in here is the underwater driving. I can't believe it took until Mario Kart 7 for you to be able to drive in the underwater areas. I mean, sure you could drive in the water in the past, but it was only at the surface level and it just made you go slower. But now, driving underwater is an integral part of some tracks, which again, it allowed for so many new possibilities for tracks. And it was beautifully first showcased in the coral reefs of Cheep Cheep Cape. No, Bertil Auris, before you say it, I'm not calling it Cheep Cheep Lagoon. Cheep Cheep Cape is a cool reference to Wii Koopa Cape. And speaking of which, yeah, the underwater feature wasn't all kingly. At times, it also felt like the developers were so obsessed with this feature, they put it in places where it didn't belong, like the inside of the pipe in Wii Koopa Cape's remake. But honestly, I don't think I'm lying when I say how much of an impact these 3 features had on the franchise. Why else do you think about 87% of all tracks in Mario Kart 8 have incorporated one of these gimmicks? Even the city tracks we see in the Booster Course Pass are mildly inspired by the section feature, even if they're lap-based. The only other instances I can think of a gameplay gimmick being this impactful are the tricks from Mario Kart Wii and the retro course formula from Mario Kart DS. But those were one each. These are 3 features that not only left the mark, but it also made for one of the most consistent and unique course selections in the series for this game. From Shy Guy Bazaar to Mario Circuit, Melody Motorway, Alpine Pass, Piranha Plant Pipeway, the Woohoo tracks, Wario's Galleon, and of course the most ambitious Rainbow Road in the series. And yes, I mentioned Mario Circuit, even that track was great. And those were the Nitro tracks. What about the retro tracks? Well, to be completely honest with you, sure, Mario Kart 8's retro tracks might be the most impressive ones. They took seemingly lifeless tracks and gave them the glow up of the century. But how good are the retro tracks? Sure, you've got a lot of really quality ones, but a lot of the retro tracks were also just kind of forgettable at their core, whose only merit is their glow up. For Mario Kart 7 though, they went out of their way to primarily prioritize fan favorite courses, with only a few duds. Now yes, fan favorite doesn't always mean you like it, but when a course is a fan favorite, there is usually a good reason as to why. And this selection is sprawling with them. Even in the Shell Cup. Yes, the Shell Cup has fan favorites. Add in the new gameplay features I just mentioned, and even the mediocre tracks like GB Bowser Castle 1 and SNES Mario Circuit 2 became fun. It's not easy to see why anyone would call Mario Kart 7's retro track selection their favorite one. And again, it's not just the courses themselves, the gameplay makes it all the more fun. Even if these 3 additions didn't exist, I'd still call the gameplay of Mario Kart 7 my favorite one by far. It's not just the big things, they even improved and added a lot of small things you may not immediately notice. Mario Kart 7 just feels really smooth to play compared to something like Mario Kart DS or Wii. The only way the gameplay could honestly be improved is with purple sparks. And speaking of purple, yes, I know, Waluigi sadly isn't playable in Mario Kart 7. It's a bit lame to exclude such an integral character in the Mario Kart series, especially when he has a track named after him here. But bear with me. To be completely fair, what we got instead was honestly more than worth it, at least for just one game. The character roster in Mario Kart 7 is just wacky in every way. I mean, Lakitu, Wiggler, Honey Queen? It's the most random selection of new drivers in any Mario Kart game, and that's why I love it so much. It's a bit unfortunate that people didn't appreciate these new drivers, seeing as in the next game, the only new thing we got was clones. Another new feature in Mario Kart 7 is the vehicle customization, which allows you to not only choose what kart you want to drive in, but even what tires and gliders. Frankly, there was always a certain charm with just having a select few karts you could pick from, depending on your class, like in Double Dash and Wii, especially in Double Dash. But this is not a bad change, and on the plus side, it does allow you to make a kart more personal to you, further proving my point about Mario Kart 7 feeling more charming, as I said at the start of the video. I, for example, always named Honey Queen with Gherkin, Gold Wheels and Gold Glider in my childhood. That was always kind of my thing. All of this has always made Mario Kart 7 one of the most memorable games for me.
Oh yeah? Even if this game has those, where is the versus mode?
Why of course you had to mention it. Admittedly, the lack of a proper versus mode does sink Mario Kart 7 much more than it needs to, and it is the #1 complaint people usually have about this game. In fact, it might be the reason why the game is as underrated as it is. The versus mode is pretty much the way to play any track you want with bots without having to resort to a specific cup like in the Grand Prix, and go through tracks you may not even want to play. Not being able to kind of do your own cup does leave a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, but quite frankly speaking, I do feel like people kind of overreact about this. As surprising as it may seem, but the only games with a single player versus mode are actually just the DS, Wii and 8. Yes, none of the other games have it, check it for yourself. Super Circuit kind of had it with the quick run feature, but it was just one race and there wasn't really any customization involved. The only way you could do versus racing in those games was in local multiplayer and without bots at that. Which is also possible in Mario Kart 7, believe it or not. Not only that, but unlike those games, Mario Kart 7 also has a free online mode, which in a way also allows you to do versus racing alone. So why does Mario Kart 7 get flack for no versus mode when 64 and Double Dash, two of the most revered titles in the series, don't? I'm not justifying the lack of a versus mode, it's just that I don't think it's as big of an issue as a lot of people make it out to be. If the first 4 games didn't have it, but were still widely enjoyed by people, then Mario Kart 7 isn't that much worse when it has a billion of other things it does right, sometimes even better than the first 4 entries.
Oh, so it was worth it to sacrifice the versus mode for 2 slots of battle mode?
Now, I don't think they sacrificed the versus mode in favor of the battle mode, even if it does suspiciously look like so on the menu screen, with balloon and coin battle taking up 2 separate slots. But it still comes with a lot of problems. At the very least, the battle mode in this game doesn't force you in a team, like in Mario Kart Wii, thank goodness, which at least makes it slightly more skill-based. But everything else is kinda unremarkable. Balloon battle is simply put boring. It's just trying to hit people as often as possible. It gets old very quickly since there's no tension. Lose all balloons? Welcome back, welcome back. Coin Runners is better, but for some reason there is a limit that prevents you from collecting over 10 coins. Why? I mean, sure, there is admittedly a bit of charm in reaching a maximum and preventing others from reaching that score as well, but I don't know really, I'm kinda conflicted on this one. It loses a lot of tension that way when you don't need to worry as much about losing coins. Unfortunately, the battle stage selection isn't really that great to make up for it. In a weird way, they're just as meh as the gameplay of the mode. None of the 6 stages are that fun to play on. The retro selection is pretty forgettable in particular. For some reason, there's not a single retro Wii stage, even though it has some of the best ones and came right before this game. Instead, we have the as boring as can be GB Battle Course 1 and the glorified loops of N64 Big Donut and DS Palm Shore. They're not bad, especially with the improvements, but when they're the only retro stages in the game, it feels more lame than it needs to. The Nitro stages are actually pretty great at their core, except for Sherbet Rink. But even though Honeybee House and Woohoo Town are very well designed, they still feel barren. Maybe because they all use the same quiet and repetitive tune but with slightly different instruments. Yeah, as much as I enjoy the more homely and down-on-earth soundtrack of this game, I'm not sure it was the best idea to have this style of music on battle stages that are screaming to be chaotic. There is a certain charm in the game being a little more quiet, as I've already said, but for the battle stages, they went a little too far. Personally though, the battle mode being slightly disappointing doesn't have that much of an impact on the overall game. After all, at its core, it's just a fun little side mode to play when you want some chaos, and in that regard, it still does its job fine. In any case, at least we play on actual battle stages unlike in Mario Kart 8, and at least we aren't forced into teams like in Mario Kart Wii. So Bertil Auris, do you have any more complaints about Mario Kart 7?
I don't think so. Very well. You win this round, Albert Boring. But I'll be back bigger and better and stronger!
This is the epitome of cringe, Bertil. But yeah, I think I've mentioned everything I wanted to now. So how should I conclude this review? I think I know how. Mario Kart 7 is a game with unique priorities that ultimately benefits the experience. Despite the lack of a few almost essential things, it makes up more than enough in everything it does right, whether it be a unique atmosphere, an extraordinarily crispy gameplay, and perhaps the best track selection ever. Overall, an 8.5 out of 10. Awesome. The first good game I've reviewed.
I still can't believe that you think it's better than Mario Kart DS.
I mean, I don't think that game is awful, but compared to other installments, and especially 7, it is kinda bad. So anyways, that was my video essay on why Mario Kart 7 is an underrated gem, and my favorite title in the series. But what is your opinion on Mario Kart 7? Did this video change your mind? Did you agree with anything? If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like, share and subscribe to my channel, as I talk about nearly everything Mario related. With all of that being said, I think it's time to enjoy the fireworks on this joyous New Year's Eve, and put our opinions aside for at least one day. Wouldn't you agree, Bertil Auris?
Fine, for one day, but you're still my worst enemy!
Whatever you say, my evil twin brother.
Finally, it's about time you two don't ruin New Year's Eve.
In any case, have a happy new year everyone, and stay tuned for more Nintendo content next year from the Gerbaltic Brotherhood. Until next time, see ya!
Bye!